CD framework.
Hot chocolate.
Azure Cosmos.
Dapper.
Entity framework. Power tools.
Technology suite.
Countdown commencing. T-minus 2 minutes.
Jeremy Lickness.
Shay Rojansky.
Grace Lampson.
Martha Vickers.
.NET data. T-minus 1 minute. Thirty seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We are go for .NET Data Community Standup.
Awesome. Good afternoon, good evening, or maybe even good morning, depending on where you are on the globe. We have another Thursday. Is it Thursday? Yes, it is. So I scheduled it correctly. So another Thursday, another .NET Data /EF Community Standup. Today we have a great topic with somebody you might know from the social media and YouTube and all the other places. We will talk about it later. But as usual, let's start with what's new in EF Core 10. You might have seen that the .NET in general reached the RC1 phase, and the RC1 is quite important because it has a go live license. So basically you can use it in production and it's supported and everything. That applies to EF Core 10 as well. So definitely, if you're interested in getting access to these new features early and providing feedback, because there's still some time left before the RTM version, before the final version, to fix maybe something we forgot or some regression that happened. So definitely test it out and report it. I will be talking what's new in the RC1, because we had a great push after the last preview to get everything into the RC1 for the reasons that I've just mentioned, the go live license and everything. So it is packed with new features. The whole team was working really, really hard to make the deadline and finish the features that we decided to finish. So for a SQL Server, we have two quite a big features. The first one is that we have an experimental still, because it still needs to align and everything, but it's available there. Support for the vector search that will be available in SQL Server 2025 that will be released later. We have also support for JSON type. So if you are using or going to be using SQL Server 2025, or you are testing some previews, you can benefit from the JSON data type, from indexing and basically all the good stuff. Some improvements around Cosmos full text and hybrid search. We've implemented a lot of improvements around the complex types. So now you can have collections of complex types, JSON complex types, optional complex types. So we are kind of closing the gap between what is supported with complex types and what is not. We want to have basically anything supported. So whatever you come up with, you can use. And finally, some small feature, but it will make the previous one a little bit better, the padding for parameterized collections. So you will not have that huge query cache bloat. As usual, look for the release notes for this one. There will be some code samples and everything that you can check. And with that, let me bring our guest today on stage.
Hello.
Yeah, there he is. Today's guest, because the title was a little bit shortened to fit on the YouTube, is obviously Nick. You might know him from like Blue Sky and other social media platforms and YouTube. He is publishing a lot of blog posts and a lot of tips and tricks. I am personally reading every single one of those. And he is also streaming every week. Is it every week?
Yeah, I do stream every Monday at 7 p.m. But the streams I do are generally more like software engineering in general, and I try to code, but there's a lot of pressure to code. So
Yep. And from time to time, I'm also watching your commute. How is it called?
yes,
I forgot it.
Code Commute. That's one of
Code
my
Commute.
my YouTube channels that I have, where I basically try to take in questions that software engineers have, like from all different levels, whether they're aspiring or senior, whatever it happens to be, and then try to use my commute time to answer questions. So
Yeah, I definitely like that one. I'm not commuting because I'm working remotely, so my commute is, I don't know, like 20 steps or something. But I definitely, if I have some like downtime, maybe waiting for something like build to finish or stuff, I'm checking those as well, because these are really interesting for the questions that and what you are answering, and basically different point of view on different topics and everything. So introduce yourself. Well, we kind of did.
sure,
But
yeah.
tell us what you do and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been at Microsoft for just over 5 years now. I work in the Office 365 side of the company. So I started at Microsoft on what's called the Model A deployment team. So we're responsible for helping ensure that we get, the hundreds of services deployed across the data centers across the world for all of the Office 365 services. So I did that for about 3.5 years as an engineering manager. And then I moved over to our routing plane in Office 365. So I am one of the engineering managers for our routing plane, and I have some responsibility over our caching system, our routing accuracy, and how we resolve routes for traffic, and also our firewall. And so our platform is responsible for roughly like 5 trillion requests per day. That's like
Wow.
TR. Yeah, so many requests. So that's what I do at Microsoft. I've been an engineering manager now for 13 years, but I still love to code. I code every day. And my main YouTube channel is actually called Dev Leader. And so Dev Leader is the social media handle that I use for basically everything that I do. And it's a mix of things, right? So I try to show programming examples in C# because that's what I love to use. And then everything else that I talk about is me trying to share perspective on software engineering in general. Because I have been, an IC and a manager at the same time for 8 years. So trying to like blend those perspectives and moving more into like full-time people management, what that looks like as well. So I try to make sure that I can, like, my goal is to give people different perspective and not to say like my perspective is the right one, because I don't think such a thing exists.
Awesome. You mentioned routing. Is it really like pockets and stuff, or something else?
So yeah, it would be the layers above that. So like all of the HTTP requests that come in. So not the networking part. That's another team, and then we're like partnered with them and build on top of that. So
got it. So like layer 7, basically, right?
exactly. Yep, that's exactly it.
Awesome. So guys, if you have any questions, and I see somebody posted links to your YouTube channel, so that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
because today I have my hands full. Nobody is here, no Shay that you might know, and nobody's helping me even backstage. So yeah, definitely hands full. But today we will be talking about one specific tweet or post on social media that definitely caught my attention. And by the way, this is the proof that I'm actually reading your tweets and posts and everything. I will put it on screen.
Sure.
And let me put also the link to it in case somebody would like to type it or something like that. It will definitely be part of the show notes. And this post says, turns out my first time with Dapper was much better than with EF Core, which immediately caught my attention. And I was like, okay, we need to talk with this guy. What is he talking about? Like,
Yeah.
he's really shooting into his own people or something like that. No. It was like, I want to know more, because we in EF, we love other object relational mappers. It's not like we need to be the only one and the best. We just want to be like, let's say 90% of what people need. And if you have some special needs, the remaining 10% or 5 or whatever percent, then yeah, use Dapper, use, I don't know, LLBL Gem Pro, use whatever fits your needs. The nice thing about .NET is that the connection string is the same and everything. So you don't have to worry about handling 2 different connection strings and stuff like that. And usually the knowledge is transferable. So with that, let me remove this one. Let's jump
I
into
regret
it.
posting it now. No.
By the way, I intentionally made it a little bit smaller, but if you look at the post, it was posted February 23rd. I'm looking at it. And today is, what is today? September, right?
Yeah.
So it took quite a bit of shuffling to get all the ducks aligned and everything. So if you are posting stuff that you would like to see and other stuff, just bear with me, because sometimes I am working with some schedules and left and right. So it takes a little bit of time, and we have like some priorities and everything. So we are definitely listening, but yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit of planning and stuff with the guests and everything. And by the way, this was not fault of Nick. This was definitely on our side. So Nick was absolutely fine. He would be here on I don't know, like May or something like that. But we had to do some shuffling quite a few times. So yeah, the tweet or the post might be a little bit old now, but we are definitely happy to have you in here. So tell us, what was the starting point for the post?
Sure. Yeah. So, and I want to briefly mention that something you've said already, I think, is sort of one of the meta points that I want to make sure comes across in anything I'm saying today, which is basically like, I don't believe in anything is like purely 100% the best or the worst or anything like that. Everything is going to, everything's a tool. There's a context that we need to consider. And that means that we have, different tools and different options that we can use. So when I go to talk about this stuff, this is just my perspective from my experiences. And my goal is not to say, therefore, anyone listening to this, like, I'm trying to convince you, like, don't use Entity Framework Core, you have to use Dapper. It's nothing like that. But so what really, like, for a little bit of background, like, when I have been building C# applications and, integrating with databases, I have historically written like desktop software back before Microsoft, especially. And a lot of that was like basically like, you open up the SQL connection, write the query, run the query, pull stuff back. And I remember at the time, like this is going back, closer to like, 10 years ago, where we were talking like, hey, like, should we start introducing something like Entity Framework Core? And I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you would know, I think around the time there was some, like, I don't know, people were, pointing fingers at performance and saying like Entity Framework Core is slow. And I think I had no experience with it at the time. And I just remember that was brought up and people were like, nah, like we shouldn't bother. Let's just keep going the way we're going. So basically doing manual mapping of running queries and getting them into your data transfer objects. And so I had been writing software like that for ages and ages.
Mhm.
So when I was like, okay, like it's time to like probably start to level up like how I'm even building my own software. I should try to lean on some packages and tools that other people are going, these are the go-to. I think that when I had started working with Entity Framework Core, I think it was really just like a paradigm shift that it didn't line up for me personally. And I think a lot of it's because I'm very used to seeing the query. I'm very used to just like, I
Mhm.
need to be the one that understands what's going on. And I think one of the really awesome benefits of Entity Framework Core is that because it does abstract that, like a lot of people find a lot of value in that. And it's
Mhm.
almost that benefit is the exact reason why I find it cumbersome.
Right.
So it's doing a bunch of things to help the developer. And those are all things that I am very used to having a lot of control over. So I suddenly feel like, okay, like how am I supposed to navigate this? I think one of the things that really caught me off guard was that uh, like uh like tracking changes and that kind of stuff. I wasn't used to the paradigm of like I can manipulate the object and then when I'm done with everything, I can go save things back out and
Mhm.
Entity Framework will handle that for me. I'm very used to like I'm like I will tell you when I'm about to go, I want to specifically go write this stuff. I want to set up my own transaction. And so when I had switched over to try using Dapper, it was basically like the thin layer that I needed
Mhm.
to help do some of that mapping between getting my columns back and my queries like into record types. And just because it was so thin and gave me still all like the same visibility that I wanted, I think it just ended up being a better fit.
Nice. Would you say before I joined Microsoft, I was a technical trainer, and when I was teaching EF Core or before that even EF6, I was always trying to tell the people that the benefit of the EF is obviously the abstraction, but it's also the speed of development. Because
Mhm.
for let's say 80% of cases, it's very simple select. You are selecting something by ID. If you imagine typical line of business applications, you have like a grid, then you have a detail, you edit it, and so on and so on. So most queries, or at least at least the half, would be
Mhm.
like, give me all the columns from the table or most of the columns where ID equals something. And there is nothing super interesting in writing this type of query. So EF
Right.
can do a great job on that. And the same with the updates, right? Because most of the time you're updating a specific entity, specific columns. So then you get like the benefit of the speed and everything. It's super easy. You don't have to worry
Right.
about spaces and semicolons and everything. And then for the remaining, let's say 20%, you can go even all the way back to raw SQL and just execute whatever you want to do. In fact, in EF Core, we have infrastructure for executing raw SQL and getting objects back, even objects that are not entities. So if somebody decides to use EF as a glorified SQL execution engine, they can. Obviously, they will be throwing away a lot of features in EF, but it's definitely possible. And I've seen people do it. They were like, I like EF, but I don't like Link, or I'm not super familiar with it. And I have old application that I'm porting. I'm just copy pasting SQL. You can definitely use that. For the performance, I have to stop a little bit on that because there was even a question around it. There it is.
Sure.
So it says my current project uses both EF and Dapper. They put in Dapper because EF was slow, but in reality, it was mostly just lack of optimization knowledge. I single-handedly agree with this one, not because I want to like say that EF is great or anything like that, but I would say like maybe 3 out of 4 or something like that cases when I was helping with EF with like performance stuff, it was wrong on different levels. It was wrong database design, wrong tables and foreign keys and everything. Then it was maybe a little bit wrong on EF, and then the queries were querying maybe too much data or doing it in a really weird way just because you can do it with objects and everything, and EF would translate it. That said, I'm not saying that EF is absolutely perfect in every corner. We are trying to do best we can. One thing that people don't realize is that we are sometimes generating query that you would not write manually, but we are doing it because, let's assume we know better that this query, even though it's not super easy or super readable, will benefit from some index or something in the database. So it might not be super like something you saw on your first week in school, like, hey, this is the SQL and this is how you get the data. And we would generate something else. And then people say, well, it's weird and I don't understand it. Sometimes it's because of the performance. And sometimes, of course, we messed up and the performance is not great. And then, of course, the raw SQL is definitely way to go. All right.
I would also agree with that entire comment, by the way. Like, even as someone that likes to use Dapper, if someone said, oh, it's, it's because it's faster or because Entity Framework is slower or faster, whatever, it's usually like these things, if you understand how they're working, you can end up working with them to get what you need. It's like when people say C# is slow, and it's like, is a C# slow, or is it what you're doing with C# being slow?
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually great analogy, because we've seen people doing with C# crazy stuff. Like sometimes you have on YouTube these like challenges like parsing whatever, like 100 billion lines of CSV file. And you can clearly see that like C#, if you put effort into it, then the C# might be in like top 5, top 3, or even top 1. It depends how the boundaries are being defined and everything. And it's the same with basically any tool or any library. If you know how to use the tool, it's great. If you don't know, well, then you will make a mess anyway. It's nice to, I always tell people, if you are watching, I don't know, plumber or carpenter, sometimes you see them using suboptimal tool for the job. Like they will use hammer to hammer in screw, which is stupid thing, right? But sometimes they do for the sake of they already have the hammer in hand, or it's not going to be visible, it's not structure or whatever. They just need it or something, right? Or instead of pencil, they will use the screw because, I don't know, like you already have it in hand. That's exactly the same thing, I would say. Like if you understand the tool and you know, okay, I am kind of capable of handling screws with hammer, then I can do it. It's in my toolbox. If I don't, well, then I hit myself into the hand or whatever, and I will make a lot of pain and mess and everything.
That's almost exactly why I use Dapper. Like, because if I were to have started like from the beginning and you put both in front of me right now, odds are I would probably gravitate towards Entity Framework Core. Like there's a lot of features, there's tons of support, like like the gravity around that would pull me in that direction, like undoubtedly, I'm sure. But because of the experience I have, the analogy you were giving is great, because now for me to go shift how I think about writing software to go just to be able to use this, I'm like, I don't, and again, I'm not saying anything bad about any Entity Framework where I'm like, but the things that are being offered, I'm like, those aren't enough to pull me to overcome me having to think completely different about how I write things. That's really what it comes down to. I'm just more effective on one path. Doesn't mean that it's the right path.
That's true. Sometimes you have to kind of buy into the ecosystem and then you see the biggest benefit. So yeah, people say, oh, I'm using EF only for queries and updates I'm doing through stored procedures, and I'm managing the database schema completely differently. It's like, if it works for you, that's fine, but you are missing a lot of features and everything around it. Yeah. Okay, there is a great comment. I think of EF Core and Dapper like a pen and pencil. That's really nice analogy from Jay. Okay, so let's jump into your post, the longer one that's actually linked in the tweet, where you are introducing strongly typed IDs. Can you tell us a little bit what strongly typed IDs are and why it's something that I should be interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. And disclaimer, I it's completely escaping me. The author who made the package, that's terrible. That Andrew Locke, I think it just came back to my head. Excellent, because I would have felt terrible. So the idea with strongly typed IDs is that we can basically create a lightweight type that we can use in our code, so that I'm just going to give you an example. If you wanted a username, or maybe a user ID is probably a better one. A user ID, like, is that an integer? Is that a string? Is it a GUID? Is it a whatever? Like, instead of trying to use the primitive types everywhere in your code, which could work extremely well for you, instead of doing that, you basically create one of these strongly typed IDs, and that way you have a custom type that you can use throughout your code. So things like user IDs, I like doing this with different types of entities, so I can have like a strongly typed ID to associate with that entity. And so, yeah, that's the idea behind it. And you end up using that like a very first class type of, type in your code base.
Okay, so what you are saying is that because if I have user ID and company ID, usually these will be, let's say, integer in the database. I can mix those two integers up, and then it will be difficult to see like what happened, why I'm suddenly selecting company ID 25 while I wanted to select user ID 25. If I have the strongly typed IDs, well, then the compiler will tell me, hey, you are comparing two integers. They're not real integers, they're these objects, and they are not compatible, right?
Yeah, that's one benefit of it. I think another one that comes to mind, and by the way, like, as I go through this, like, you can always come up with counter arguments to these. So this goes back to what I said earlier of like, it's not me trying to say this makes it the right way to do it, or the only way. This is a way. One of the other things that I like about
it is we have the best number of views when somebody says something controversial, and it's just this is the correct way to do it.
Okay, I'll take that back. This is the only way, and you better use strongly typed IDs or else. So
awesome.
The other benefit that I really like is that, and again, with a lot of IDEs, like Visual Studio, of course, like, you can get away with this much easier. But I like the fact that if you have the strongly typed ID used throughout the code base, if you have a situation where you're like, hey, we need to actually move, I'm just making this up, we need to move from integers to longs. And instead of going everywhere and you're like, having to go patch all this up, you can change the type, like, that's backing the strongly typed ID, and then sort of worry about the actual migration, or actually dealing with the data and what that looks like at the boundaries of that. So not throughout the entire system.
Right. Because we have the similar discussion in EF, because one of the benefits of EF that you can say definitely is that because it's an abstraction, you can switch your database. So you can switch from Postgres to SQL Server, and your application code will change very little. You will change a few packages, a connection string, and that's probably it, unless you are having some heavy customizations. But
right.
In the real world, switching the database is something that happens not that often. And even if it does, it usually requires way more orchestration around it. Not only the code, but also let's say the admins need to understand how to manage this thing, how you can restore backups, how you can validate backups, and all this stuff. So from our experience, switching between different databases is really something that's not happening that often, unless you have a software that's from the beginning written in like database agnostic way. Have you ever experienced in your life or heard the story that somebody was switching from one data type to another?
Data type or like database?
Data type, from like integer to long or something like that.
So yes, and we so the scenario would not have been a like strongly typed ID, and I don't know, like, because we didn't have strongly typed IDs at the time, I can't sit here and say like, oh, it would have fixed it. But for the hot take, it would have fixed it 100%. We actually had a scenario where, for a little bit of context, the software that I was building before we use SQLite databases, and that might kind of shock people because they're like, what do you mean SQLite? Like, that's only for phones, or you can't scale anything with that. The idea was that for our users, we actually needed the database to be something that's kind of like a save file for, without going into the details of it. So that has all of the context. And so they want to be able to move that around. They don't actually, at the time, maybe these days, they actually have like products that have central storage for this stuff. But at the time, that's not how it worked. They would very much want their files dedicated. So we used a SQLite database. We had our schema set up in a way that was not very normalized, I would say. It was very much like, it looked like an Excel sheet, basically. And so it was very interesting, and it worked, though. So when we were trying to migrate our schema to a newer format that felt like this is what we need to actually start scaling our system up a little bit more, going from like, maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of records potentially into millions on some of these things, we just needed to do a little bit more. And at that time, we were talking about changing some of our identifiers into wrong decision GUIDs. So we had actual GUIDs, not some of the newer types that have like, what do they call them? Like, I can't remember the version. The new versions of GUIDs that have like the sort of the time component to them, where they're still random, but you can generate a GUID that's not fully randomized. So when you make an index on it, it's not going to destroy the index. So anyway, the migration. Yes, thank you. So the migration that we were doing was actually over to like changing our identifiers from like strings, or technically we were using row IDs, just straight up the SQLite row IDs, over to these GUIDs. And so we had to go migrate all of that data. I think that's the only time in my career, in like, I don't know, like 15 years of software development, I've ever seen that, though.
Nice. You kind of remembered, you kind of sparked in my head. When I was working in Belgium, I had a colleague and friend there. We are still friends today. And he was this type of guy, like, do things, you know what I mean? Like, instead of thinking too much about it, just do it. And then we can think about the consequences later. He was a great guy, great developer, everything. But this was like, he was too much on this, like, do it and then fix it later. And he always, when he designed his database, he basically created every column as a blob. Because it was like, I don't know what's going to be in there. It's like numbered today, but maybe in the future it will be good, and I don't want to deal with it. And we were always making fun of him. It's like, dude, you don't know how to create like a properly normalized database structure. And quite a few times, I don't remember the exact number, but I would say at least like 10, maybe 12 times over the lifetime of this software, we've had to change from like a integer to really long string. That was one case, or even a blob, because it turned out that the system we were integrating with or something like that was giving us some weird identifiers.
Oh, okay.
Or they switched it because they started to do like number and then one letter and another number, whatever was there. And we had to switch it. And he was always like, if it would be blob from the beginning, it would be so much easier. And I was like, yeah, but this is like 12 times it happened. And we have, I don't know, at the time it was like 400 tables in the database and thousands of columns. We're just like, it's really not there, but something like that. Yeah, I can imagine.
Amazing. That's good.
Okay. I had one and then I removed it.
Oh, sure.
It was really interesting. There it is. You really can scale SQLite to pretty big setup. Just have it to set up well. Don't underestimate simple things. I agree with that. And even in general, people are sometimes switching to new things. It might be database, it might be programming language, it might be something else. And if you would spend a little bit of time learning and studying, you would realize that you can do amazing things with what you have, and you don't have to switch and you don't have to rewrite and everything like that.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but if you go to the SQLite website, they say on there, like, it's not a joke, but like they have some data that's like, hey, like this thing scales up to like probably well beyond most people's needs for like any application they have. It's pretty incredible.
Exactly. Yes. All right. Do you have some piece of code that you can show us how the strongly
Sure.
typed IDs work? Should I
Yeah,
bring the
and
screen up?
yeah, absolutely. It should be good to go. Hopefully folks can see it. So I'm gonna scroll down to the bottom of this, and please be kind in the comments. We're not trying to code review Nick's code here, but but I can kind of talk a little bit about what's on screen. So I have two of these like data transfer objects, so literally named with DTO in the name. And then you can see across these two positional records that I have a badge ID and a badge group ID. And so, regardless of the context, this is just like for a badge system in an application. But I actually have a user ID at the bottom as well. So these are strongly typed IDs. And
Mhm.
so, just as an example, the badge ID, this would be like the primary key for this record that I have in the database. The table that I would have for this is effectively like exactly, every property here would just map to the column. So, like what was said earlier, this is basically like a very straight up one-to-one mapping. The query for this would be very, very simple. But the badge ID and the badge group ID, like I have another table that's badge groups. And so I can group these things together. And like maybe not the best argument, but like I can't mix those things up in my code because they are strongly typed. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was like badge ID, like actually I don't know or need to know. Actually, I do know, but I don't need to know what type this is behind the scenes right now in my code because it doesn't actually matter. I just know that I'm dealing with a badge ID. I know that it's a long just because I made all of the IDs in my system basically like a snowflake type of ID. So
Mhm.
this is an example of defining a strongly typed ID with the NuGet package from Andrew Locke. And so you end up you basically put this attribute on top of it and then this pretty simple declaration here. And then you can switch the actual backing type. So from long to string, or if you wanted to use GUIDs, that kind of stuff. So um, in your code, you actually do get the benefit of, like if I needed to somewhere, badge ID, like you can see I'm using badge ID dot value.
Mhm.
I hope my tooltips and stuff are coming through. Are they or
No,
no?
the tooltips
Okay.
are not visible.
Oh, that's awkward. Okay, so if I do badge ID dot value, the tooltip is showing like this is a long, so like you can actually work with the underlying type as you need to, but
Mhm.
throughout the code, if you're just using the strongly typed ID, you don't really have to think about it until you're at these edge cases, like in this case when I'm actually working with the database.
Right. Um, you are obviously mentioning the strongly typed IDs package, but can I use them without this package? How would the type look like in like plain C#? Can I write it manually, or is
Sure.
there a lot of code behind it, or can I simply do it if I want to play with it? Right, for example, how does it look like if I would be just
Yeah,
starting with it?
great examples, or sorry, great question. Great example, but hopefully my example is a great one to answer your question. But yeah, the NuGet package itself does some code generation, which takes care a lot of that for you. And I jumped to this, and then I lost my. There we go. So it's a partial class. If I jump over to the other part of this, and sorry if the text is really small, but it says .g.cs because this part gets generated, and there is a lot of code, and a lot of this is just to give you what I would say is like the benefit of having like a feature rich type, like
Mhm.
as an identifier. But honestly, a lot of these things are perhaps overkill. I think the fact that if we think about like records, records compared to classes, when we had records introduced, being able to do those types of comparisons and a lot of the things that make them really nice for DTOs, I feel like this strongly typed ID package gives us like that similar type of benefit for working with your identifiers. But do you need all of that? Like, probably not. There's some stuff for like parsing. So if you're like,
Mhm.
odds are at some point I have to, put my ID to string, and at some point I want to be able to parse it from a string back into. whether it's a string or a GUID or a long, like backing your strongly typed ID, like you get like a try
Yes.
parse method and stuff like that on there. So you could roll your own for sure. But I think one of the things that gets kind of crappy is that you would probably make one of these classes and you would go, okay, well, the next time I want to make a strongly typed ID, like that's going to be a lot of code to go like copy and paste, and you do it a
Right.
couple times, and you would probably go, well, what if I make like a generic one or like a base
Yeah.
type for it or something? So you could probably go do this, and I think it ends up kind of moving in the direction of use code generation, and you can
Right.
get this stuff blasted out. But
Yeah. So basically, for the viewers, it's nothing. There's no dark magic inside. It's just like badge ID is just wrapping or hiding the integer or long in this case underneath.
Right.
And you can get the underlying long, and from the long you can get the badge ID with like exactly parsing and everything. There is a great question. Is this an example of the new type pattern? And could we do something similar for strings, thinking like email and username that should never be mixed up? So if I'm reading the question correctly, would you do custom data type even for like an email or username instead of just plain string? Or would you just use this for IDs only?
So it's a good question. At least in my use cases, most of the time it's IDs. I think the other situations. So like, I don't have a good answer for this because I'm actually in the middle. And if like practically speaking, if I think about some of the code I've written, I have not done it for emails. Could I or should I have? Perhaps based on some of like the other arguments I might have, but so like at least in this code base that's on my screen, I have so for a little bit of context, there's a lot of integration with social media platforms. This is actually the code that I wrote that helps me publish all of my content to social media. So if I have to go integrate with a particular platform, there's going to be things like access tokens, refresh tokens. And then I went, wait a second, those tokens are different. They're tokens, they're just strings, but I actually have strongly typed like access token and refresh token for some platforms. And then for those, I won't mess those up. But an email and a name, like, the argument still holds. Like, if you're doing it for those ones and you don't want to mess up or mix up the username and the email, why wouldn't you? And I guess the reason is like the mixing up part for some of those things happens less. But if I just have like a variable named token or something, maybe it's poorly named, like I might end up mixing it up because I'm not thinking about the context. It's not the best reason, but like it's just an extra little bit of safety. That's all.
Yeah. I would say that for like username or email, it's always about how far you want to go, right? Because what happens, for example, if you mix up username and an email? Maybe you overwrite name with email or something. It depends on your scenario. I would say if you're writing some identity software, I would definitely say, well, email and username might be something that you don't definitely want to mix up. So then you would have a strongly typed stuff. If it's just part of some entity called user, chances are that you will not mix up. So the string is probably fine. Yeah.
That's
There's
such
another
a
question.
good point. Yeah, like taking patterns, like I have historically, and I've done this on purpose, where I've taken patterns and tried to just like keep using them until they fall apart. And like in this case, I think I found a sweet spot that works for me. And like maybe there's going to be cases where emails and usernames I do that, but it's just not really that common for me.
Yeah. There's another question. I'm a junior engineer here. I thought if we have a table related to another table, the primary should have the same type. So I can probably answer this one. The underlying type in the database will still be long or int or whatever you decide. The strongly typed IDs is only for your C# code, where every integer looks exactly the same as another, and you don't want to mix them up. But in the database, well, databases, at least most of the relational databases, do not support custom types. So you still have integer, you still have long, you still have GUIDs, and you will be using those in the underlying tables. And these strongly typed IDs are purely in your C# code.
Yeah, if that was a question about the actual relationship between two tables, like my code's still on the screen, I guess, so I wanted to jump over to this, but like if
Yeah.
I have a badge table that basically, I know this is code, but the table looks very much like this, the badge group, like the group ID for badges does not have to be the same type as a badge ID. Like if this is a long, I could have my groups keyed by strings if I want to. But this badge group ID must be a string here, and then the primary key of the badge groups must also be a string.
Yeah, there's another question. I like it, and this is more like maybe runtime / C# thing, but we can definitely answer this one. What are the performance / memory costs of using strongly typed IDs? Is there a way of erasing the types at runtime?
Yeah, so on the last, I don't know how to answer the last part of that question. I think for the first part, there is going to be a bit of performance overhead, but I have not measured it to actually to like tell you like what the overhead is, if it's like 5% or something way smaller. At least for the scale of applications that I'm working on right now, it's not an issue because it's not like I'm trying to like maximize, writing hundreds of thousands of records or something in a small period of time. So, or reading back, like the performance overhead that would exist for me at least is at a point where it's not really noticeable. If anything, like kind of what we were saying earlier, like if you're using Entity Framework Core and saying like, oh, use Dapper instead because it's going to be faster, as an example, like if I were trying to switch away from strongly typed IDs to get more speed, I bet you I would have way more success getting speed out of my queries or putting indexes in the right spot versus strongly typed IDs. And I don't suspect that this person was asking this to say it's terrible, but I actually don't have the data. I'm just trying to kind of give my perspective on how I would approach it.
Yeah, I think this one falls into like two different approaches that I'm sometimes trying to teach people. The first one is, well, are you writing your code, your applications in assembler or in assembly? No, you are using higher level languages. Maybe you are using C++, maybe you are using Python, maybe you are using C#. Obviously, there is a little bit of performance / memory cost in using Python compared to pure assembly. But in assembly, you would be 10 times, maybe 100 times slower. So that's why we not do that. The same applies to here. The other one is, it happens in EF Core repo from time to time that somebody claims like, hey, this is slow and whatnot. Unless you have, first of all, a benchmark that represents a real world scenario, it's useless to measure these two pieces, because I can create with a benchmark where something is faster or something is slower than the other stuff. It's just what I'm measuring. And as you said, you can get a lot of speed up from optimizing queries, creating indexes, and so on. Obviously, if you have a use case where, okay, well, this is costing me a lot of memory, and I can pinpoint it from memory dump or perfview or something, then we can start thinking about, is this good approach in what we are doing? The second part of the question, is there a way of erasing the types at runtime? At this point, no. Obviously, a JIT will do a little bit of magic in if you have it as a structure, so it might live in the registry or on the stack and everything. But so far, C# in general or runtime in general does not have this feature. I know some other runtimes or some other languages or environments do have this one. This is not, it will also be pretty interesting from the other point of view. If you erase the types and later do some reflection or serialization, deserialization, you will not be able to see what the type should actually be because it was erased at runtime. Obviously, there are ways to work around it. There might be some extra tables, extra meta information, but we are getting a little bit into the C# stuff and runtime. All right. Good. Let me check the questions. Yeah. He also nicely responded that he's not saying that it's bad. We did not even think, as I said before we started, we have a great audience in here. Nobody is picking on anybody. But by the way, guys, if you would like to create a little bit of drama on social media and kind of bring the views on this live stream up, we are definitely up for it. But yeah, definitely a great audience. Good. Let me check then. Yes. Okay. So that brings me back to the EF/Dapper questions.
Sure.
How is this handled on the Dapper side? Do I have to do some extra code to have an integer deserialized into badge ID, or is it happening automatically, or is there some infrastructure that basically says like, hey, if you see this object, call this constructor, and that's it?
Yep, great question. So to be fully transparent, I am not sure if Andrew Locke or the Dapper team have have done their own thing to go make this more magic, but it did not work out of the box for me. So what was happening originally when I was putting a lot of this code together in this repository was that I had my DTOs did not have the strongly typed IDs on them at the sort of my data layer. And then I would translate those to another type manually and use them throughout my application so that they were strongly typed. But really at these edges, like my data layer, they weren't. And then I was like, this feels kind of bad because like I have to make two entities like automatically. It just like this is way overkill. And I realized that with a little bit of code, I can actually do the mapping almost automatically. And I think originally it was using some reflection, which is obviously not going to be stellar. Back to the performance question. If every time I'm reading, I'm using reflection to go do this kind of thing. But I think that I got it to use like reflection or like one time or, oh, why can't I remember the name of it? We have something in .NET now that's unsafe accessors. I think I was able to use that to like to make it basically nearly instantaneous. And again, back to no real performance overhead.
Nice. There's a lot of questions about Dapper and migrations, but this is not something that we want to cover in here and stuff. I have another question that's kind of related to this, because if I have like IDs and longs and everything, I can pass them easily through like query strings and basically in like my ASP.NET Core layer. Did you encounter any problems when using strongly typed IDs from like the other side of the world, not like the lower part where you are talking with database, but the upper part where the ID might be in query string or part of JSON or something like that?
Yeah, great question. And funny enough, I don't think now that you're asking it, I don't think that I even attempted to. I think that at my boundary, so again, coming from the other side in so ASP.NET Core, whether that's on a record type that's going to be my request body or query parameters, I think that I took the mindset that it needs to be like a primitive type, and I just like assume that. So right at that top level, as soon as it's coming in from ASP.NET Core and I have the opportunity to start working with it, I do translations like immediately. So that like as an example, and actually there's some weird stuff where like serialization with longs between like JavaScript front ends and .NET backends, like they do rounding sometimes. So a lot of I use a lot of long identifiers. And so I actually make them strings and I end up having to parse them anyway. So it's weird. I don't know what the detail is, but I've made two like larger systems now where this has bitten me twice. And I forget each time I do it, but it ends up rounding the last couple of digits. And I'm like, that ID doesn't exist anywhere. But yeah, to answer your question, I go with primitive types and transform them like right away manually.
Interesting. You mentioned that your IDs are basically a snowflake. Can you explain to the audience what a snowflake ID is and like why you decided to use it?
Yeah, and I probably would have used the new GUID formats if I realized like that was going to be just like sort of baked in and made so accessible.
Yeah.
But what I needed to do was have because there was a question earlier in the chat too, like why not use GUIDs for
Mhm.
keys for your primary keys. And the reason is that when you're using a true GUID, it's like because it's like fully random, your index as your data is growing becomes extremely. It's like just extremely inefficient because it ends up being like very balanced. Or
Mhm.
it's one. What's it? It's. I'm saying the opposite. This feels like a coding interview question. It ends up making your tree to go do the lookup extremely inefficient
Yes.
because there is no sorting. So when you have something that is like, if you had integers that were constantly increasing, it's going to be very easy to go look that up. But with these pseudo random identifiers, we can still get something that is random enough where we're not going to have collisions. Like the likelihood is going to be basically zero, and we can get something that is like sort of more sortable. So with a snowflake ID, I can't remember the components of it, but you're able to, at least with the library I'm using, it's called ID gen or ID generator.
Mhm.
It makes snowflake IDs. You can change how many bits are used for what. And especially if you're using distributed systems, if you have different nodes, you can actually make it such that those nodes have unique identifiers, and then you have less likelihood of those two nodes like sort of generating IDs in the overlapping range. I
Mhm.
think this comes from Twitter. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's okay. I'm going to say I might be going off the rails with that one, but I think it comes from Twitter.
Yes, that's correct. Awesome. And you mentioned the distributed systems and everything. That's basically to imagine how the snowflake is. Imagine a long number, and the first couple of, in this case, bits, but let's imagine digits, will be fixed for, let's say, the machine or the shard or the data center or something like that. And the remaining part of the digits will be generated normally. So sometimes it's like the poor man's implementation is that you take two integers and create a long from it, because that's 32 plus 32 bits. And the first or the last, whatever, 32 bits are fixed, and they are decided by deployment, configuration, something like that. And the next 32 bits are the normal, like, auto increment ID you get from the database or something like that. And you are putting them together. So you will not have a collision, but you still have the no single point of failure, no single node that would be distributing IDs or something like that. Because if this node goes offline for whatever reason, then we have a problem and your system is kind of paralyzed. With this, you can just keep on working, and that's it. On the GUID side, by the way, there's a new format of GUIDs. It's, I think, version 7, and
Yeah.
we have a support for it in EF. So if somebody is planning to use GUID version 7 with all the benefits or maybe even drawbacks that it has, we have that support in EF, and you can nicely use it. And I think, I'm not sure whether it's new in EF10. I have a feeling that it was already, sorry, not EF10, .NET 10. I think it was already in .NET 9, but I'm not 100% sure, especially in this time, because everybody in our team is like talking .NET 10 as the current version, but it's still not RTM'd. So for me, the current and previous are kind of messed up. So when I'm thinking, oh, it was previous version, I'm maybe thinking .NET 9, .NET 10, current version, whatever. GUID version 7, you can definitely Google it with Bing or Bing it with ChatGPT and get the answer. Awesome. We are close to finishing. We have like 2 minutes. Do you have something that you would like to promote or plug? Maybe your book or live stream or
I wish I
blog?
had a book. No, I
Well,
don't
I
have a
think
book.
you can take all of your blog posts and put them into the book. And I have to say, if I would be like beginning developer at the beginning of my career, your blog would be definitely something that I would read
Awesome. Thank
from
you.
top to bottom, because you are producing great content and you are putting like a common sense or putting common sense onto, like, let's call it hype that might be sometimes happening.
Yeah,
Which
well,
is
no,
great.
I definitely appreciate that. Yeah, no book from me, unfortunately. But yeah, I actually have like 4 YouTube channels. So I have Dev Leader, which is my main one where I have all my C# content. And again, for folks, if you're on any social media platform, Dev Leader is the handle I use for posting everything from C# programming to general software engineering stuff. But that YouTube channel is moved to basically C# development and using AI tools for programming. And then I have a couple others. Code Commute we mentioned. So if you enjoy it sort of like a raw vlog kind of like Q&A format, I take questions on the channel so anyone can write questions in and then I just try to answer them. And then the 2 others I have, the Dev Leader podcast. I do a live stream every Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific, and then I interview software engineers as well. And the other one I have is called Dev Leader Path to Tech. I try to do resume reviews for people and try to see if I can just give tips on like what's working well or areas to improve. So yeah, I like making content. I try to make as much free content as possible. And then the thing that tries, like I used to fund all of my social media stuff is I also create courses on a platform called Dome Train. So for folks that are familiar with the bigger YouTubers in .NET, Nick Chapsis has a course platform called Dome Train. And so I have the getting started and deep dive courses for C# there. And that's really how I fund my social media and video editing and all that.
Yeah, all the links into the YouTube channels and blogs and social media will be part of the show notes. As usual, I'm publishing it roughly 12 hours after this live stream. So if you're looking into subscribing to Nick's YouTube channels and everything, check a little bit later on the website aka.ms/ef standups, where it will redirect you to a page where all the stand-ups, all the links and everything are posted, and you will be able to subscribe and watch and read and be definitely aligned with me saying that the content is definitely great.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
With that, we are out of time. So thank you, Nick. It was fun and I enjoyed it. Hopefully the audience liked the content and the basically education, I would say. We will have another stream next month, and for the November, where .NET 10 and all the different 10 packages are going to be released, we have a special plan for EF. So definitely stay tuned on Twitch or YouTube, or just check what's happening on our repo. Check the EF Core RC1. As I said, it's go live, and you have the final, more or less the final way of changing something or providing feedback before it's burned on CDs and sent to you on CDs. Well, we no longer send it on CDs and burn it. So we can change it a little bit faster than burning a new CD. But yeah, definitely the first servicing and everything takes a little bit of time. So better to have the RTM version great, and we are testing it ourselves and making sure it's best possible, but outside feedback is more than welcome. With that, thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure. If you want to see Nick again, definitely let me know, and we will find some other controversial tweet that he posts about EF and Dapper, and we will bring him in and beat him or something like that. So he finally
I gotta get all my
realized
benchmarks ready. Yeah.
exactly. And see you next month. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.